Welcome back to the channel. I want to give a really big thank you to all of you for all the love and support on the last video. Really means a lot, and it's really nice to know that a lot of people like watching the content as much as I like making it. So, again, really big thank you for all that, and I hope you all stick around for everything we have planned for the future. We do have plans, I promise we do. Totally not winging it. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about the Jersey Devil and how Ben Franklin played a really big role in perpetuating this myth that eventually became a folklore story, that eventually became a monster. And this monster apparently it had sightings. People said they saw it. People said like they caught it. They killed a ton of stuff about it. And it's reached a point where this monster has even been in movies, games, TV shows, and currently, which I find the funniest personally, it even has a hockey team named after it. So yeah, that's what we're gonna be talking about, and hope you enjoy the ride because it is definitely a wild one. The start of our story goes way back in the United States history to 1677, during a time where the colonies were in what I would call essentially their adolescent stage. The revolution wouldn't happen for almost another century or so, but those disgruntled feelings towards the monarchy and the Crown of England itself were slowly brewing throughout the colonies, and in 1677, a man by the name of Daniel Leeds came to settle in the colonies. More specifically, he settled in Burlington, which was one of the capitals of Jersey at the time. It might still be the capital of Jersey. I've never been to Jersey, and for some reason that's the one part of this video I didn't look up, so that's my own fault. So if it is the capital of Jersey, please let me know. Daniel Leeds was a Quaker, which sounds a little insignificant to the story about the founding fathers and monsters, but it's important because it's the Quakers themselves who would eventually ostracize Daniel Leeds. See, once he settled and got his lay of the land, Leeds started to publish his own almanac. At the time, an almanac was essentially just pretty much a newspaper. People wrote them to like predict the weather, update people on the best time to plant their crops, and they also wrote about small events or just opinion pieces and just a bunch of stuff like that. And like I said, it's really just an early version of the newspaper. After Daniel started posting his almanacs, pretty quickly he started to face a ton of heavy backlash from the Quakers because in his almanacs he would refer to a lot of astrology in his writing, which they saw as too pagan, and they pretty much just demanded that he stop doing what he's doing because they just don't like it, and they're calling him a pagan, which is bad. Unfortunately for him and the rest of his bloodline, pretty much, he decided to double down, and in his almanacs, he started to mock the Quakers, which, again, really bad move, because once he did that, they started to spread word amongst the people that he was evil, and back then, that word had a lot of meaning, so once you called someone evil once, their life was pretty much on a path to be ruined if they didn't, shape up or change their act pretty quickly. And to make matters worse, he was very open and loud about his support for Lord Cornbury, who, aside from having the worst name I've ever heard, was one of the first royal governors of Jersey. And as I mentioned at the start, the people in the colonies were not too happy with anything royalty related at the time. They weren't ready for revolution, but those feelings were really prevalent among certain sects of the colony. And unfortunately for Leeds, Jersey was one of those places that did not like anything royals related at all. So that means if there was anyone who didn't really care about the whole Quaker thing he had going on and just, was letting his weird rants about astrology slide, they now hated him too. But for some reason, be it pride or just pure naive confidence in the work he was doing, Leeds decided to double down a second time, and he wrote a collection of books that not only made the Quakers out to look like a bunch of idiots, but he also staunchly defended his political views. And to make this whole thing even worse, he also went so far as to try and criticize the Quakers for the things he thought they were doing wrong in the community and in Jersey. Whether or not they were actually doing anything wrong is beyond me. Like, there's no way for me to know or anybody to know, really. But the point is that if he wanted to have an easy life in Jersey, he was going about it in the worst possible way, so much so that the Quakers, they moved on from calling him evil, and they chose a name that they felt was more fitting, and the name they decided to give him was Satan's Harbinger. I'm sure having that be what people call you was literally practically a death sentence in that area, but if I'm being perfectly honest, having Satan's Harbinger be your epithet goes so unequivocally hard, but I digress. Now, I bet you're wondering how Ben Franklin plays any role in this story since we're this far into the video. I don't actually know how far we're into it. I'll have Zito throw up a timestamp like right here. But we're finally at a point where Ben Franklin starts to make his very long-awaited appearance, kind of like the main villain at the end of the first book. What I think a lot of you will find interesting is that Daniel Leeds isn't the titular character of the Ben Franklin arc of this story, and instead, in true JoJo fashion, the story shifts generations, and it's actually his son who has beef with Ben Franklin, a very nasty beef too, if I'm being honest. Around 1716, Daniel Leeds' son, Titan Leeds, weird name to give your son, but go off, took over the almanac since his father was too old to continue his war with the Quakers. And I say that jokingly because I couldn't find too much info on how long this weird beef between Daniel Leeds and the Quakers lasted, or if, Daniel was just taking shots at the Quakers for his entire career doing the almanac. But it doesn't really matter too much when Titan Leeds immediately just started facing heavy backlash. And the reason for this is because Titan pretty much carried on with the almanac the exact way his father had originally planned for it to go, which basically means more astrology, less Quaker slander. And while I'm sure the community would have taken a little more kindly to his son just because he was about 17 at the time, everything Daniel had done essentially ruined the entire family in the public eye, and it was going to take a lot of work to try to rebuild from that. However, it seemed Titan wasn't above making his own weird decisions that would put his family in this position to be even more hated than they already were. He started to put their family crest at the front of their almanac, I guess as a sign of their support for monarchy. And again, the people of Jersey hated anything related to monarchy, aristocracy, and again, anything noble like a family crest. So this only made them hate him, again, even more since his dad had given him the business. For anyone wondering what the Leeds family crest was, by the way, it was this. Put it up here, which is a wyvern and a bat dragon hybrid that stood on 2 feet. And I don't know about you, but it kind of has a stark resemblance to what the Jersey Devil would eventually be described as. Now, I know all this sounds kind of like a repeat of what Daniel Leeds was already doing, and just a little worse depending on how you look at it. But there was something that was really different about Titan's time running the almanac. A few years into his run of the almanac, Titan would gain a rival, something his father never really had to deal with since he was something of like a pioneer in the almanac business. And that rival in question was Ben Franklin, who at the time was publishing his own almanac under the title Poor Richard's Almanac. And he was pretty much around the same age as Titan was when Titan originally took over his father. So he was 17, 16-ish, maybe 18 at the oldest. But the point is that Franklin was sort of in his upstart era, and obviously he wanted to make a name for himself. And while he was able to really quickly become a competitor to the Leeds Almanac, he didn't really want to just be known as Leeds' rival. He wanted something to, he wanted to be the Almanac in Jersey. So what do you do when you have a rival and you want to make sure that you indefinitely defeat them in the public eye and there is never any coming back for them? That's the big question that was on Ben Franklin's mind, and after a few shots back and forth here and there that just wasn't working, Franklin thought of a really great way to really get under Titan's skin. Why not use the astrology that, the Leeds family clearly loves so much? Why not use that against them? It was meant to piss off Titan, and it definitely worked since Titan waited all the way until October had passed and published an almanac calling Franklin a fool and a liar and just generally mocking him for his false prediction. What I found a little funny was that Franklin was apparently really surprised that this was all it took to get that much of an emotional response from Titan, but he refused to let a chance like this slip, and he claimed that Leeds definitely did die, but because of the pagan stuff and all that astrology, and because his father was Satan's harbinger, Titan was resurrected and was now a ghost who was writing the almanac, not Titan himself. Now, I know your first thought is probably, did anyone believe that Titan died and was resurrected from the dead by the devil with the sole purpose of publishing an almanac? And the answer is yes, people absolutely believed it, which I find hilarious. Once Titan realized just how heavy that blow from Franklin could be, and that if he didn't deal with it fast enough, it would probably lead to the demonization of his entire family for the rest of their lives, which it did, he tried to argue as best he could against Franklin, basically telling him that he was lying and calling him a million words that basically just mean liar, and he did his best to prove to people that he was alive. Unfortunately for Titan, Franklin didn't give up even a little bit, and he continued to refer to Titan as a ghost. I think it got to the point where he wasn't even calling him by name. Just when he referred to ghost in his almanac, everyone knew it meant Titan. And to really pour salt on that wound, even after Titan actually died in 1738, Benjamin Franklin continued to refer to him as Ghost until I guess he just forgot he existed or got bored. I know I put Benjamin Franklin mainly in the title, but there are a lot of different parties at fault for the demonization of the Leeds family. Some of it was the Quakers' unwillingness to see his point of view. Another good chunk of it was Daniel Leeds kind of being a bit insufferable about how pro-monarchy he was and trying to fight against the Quakers tooth and nail, apparently. And those two are honestly really valid, but honestly, I think the family could have still maybe came back from the brink if that was all they were going up against. Because a lot of it was mainly just him fighting with the general public. He didn't really have an enemy, like or like a person who he was just clashing with. And so yeah, they were disliked in the public eye, but people at least still read their almanac and they could still make a living pretty okay by writing their almanac. And like I said, I really do think that political battle with Benjamin Franklin, that was essentially just a public spectacle. I think it really was the be all end all for the Leeds family. After Titan publicly lost that battle with Benjamin Franklin, the public pretty much turned on them forever. And Franklin not letting up on his mockery didn't help either because they essentially became the most hated people in Jersey, but at the same time, a laughing stock of Jersey. So bad combo. But point being, the Leeds family was ruined and there was really no coming back from it. The insinuations and speculations on how the Leeds were linked to Satan continued even after Titan's death, and as things usually do when people gossip, they continued to escalate until it became something of a horror story shared between families, adults, and from parents to kids, which is how you make this story generational. The first written reference to the Jersey Devil wouldn't come until 1859 in the Atlantic Monthly Journal, where an article was written by W.F. Mayer, where he wrote about his time exploring in the Pine Barrens south of Jersey. While in the Pine Barrens, he encountered a resident who claimed that she had once seen the Leeds Devil, and his expedition guide had told him that the creature was mainly just a superstition and that it's nothing to really put too much of your effort or thought into, but he did end up telling him the story of Mother Leeds. In this folktale, a woman named Mother Leeds had 12 children, but when she realized she was pregnant again, she cursed her 13th child out of frustration. Basically, 12 childs, she didn't want them, I guess, something like that. But eventually, when that child is born, it's born deformed with a horse head, a snake-tipped tail, hooves, and leathery bat-like wings. And this creature screams and flies out back into the Pine Barrens, where it apparently lives and thrives and just eats animals, people, pretty much anything I could find, just a general nuisance, pretty much. That folk story pretty much ends there, and it's just kind of like a warning, like, don't go into the Pine Barrens, you're going to run into the Leeds Devil and eventually the Jersey Devil. That's what the name change would be. The story does have some variations. Sometimes Mother Leeds is a witch, other times, the father is the devil. There was one variation I saw where the mother was from Bloomington and the father was a British soldier. Tons of variations, so many that I think I could probably make a separate video on them, but the point being is that these are different, folk tales people told that pretty much just demonized the Leeds, if we're being honest. The thing is, once Mayer published his story, the whole thing just took off, and over time, the Leeds Devil would eventually become the Jersey Devil. Most likely because it's just a way catchier name and sounds a little scarier than just Leeds Devil. And for that, we can thank our dearest founding father, Ben Franklin, for all this, because if he didn't have such a oddly strong will for a successful almanac, we'd probably be down one more weird folk monster, so thanks for that. Honestly, this is probably the most fun I've had researching a video. I mean, the destruction of an entire family's name aside, a lot of the story is really goofy, especially when you picture a founding father being such an integral part of it. Ben Franklin almost comes off like a supervillain in a lot of the parts of the story, especially when he starts mocking Titan in death. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about everything leading up to the birth of the Jersey Devil and any real thoughts you had about it in general. Me and Zeta worked a little harder on this one just because we really wanted to come out swinging after the last one kind of blew up, I guess, or pretty much just got a lot more attention than we expected. I was telling him earlier, this was supposed to be our break week. There wasn't supposed to be a video this week, but here we are. Not sure what next week's video is going to be. Haven't really thought that far yet, especially, the whole break thing. But rest assured, I'm sure it'll be a good one. Some way, somehow, we're going to make that work. As always, thanks for watching and have a great day.